Good morning. I'm so glad you've joined me again today. Today I'm going to talk to you about how to teach your child about guilt and shame. These two words, like others I've mentioned to you, have been so misused and overused that they, in many ways, have become meaningless. And people don't want to admit ever that they feel guilt or shame. And I want to explain to you the difference and why these are important feelings for all of us. The first thing we need to start with is that you, as parents, I'm sure have already done this in some sense, but all of us as adults have to have some kind of a moral code. We have our morality that tells us when something is wrong and when it is not wrong. Now, when I'm talking about this, I am not talking about religion because that's not my field. And also, I think all of us know some very religious people who are very immoral. And I certainly know some very irreligious people who are some of the most moral and wonderful people I've ever met. So we're not talking about religion when we're talking about morality. We're talking about all the different sources in your life that you have learned what is right and what is wrong. And if something is wrong, it's wrong because of the consequences of the action. So generally, it's because it hurts another person or a group of people. So we have to establish that. And at some point, not this time, but at some point, we're going to look at how to put together family rules that your children will participate in and give a good groundwork for how does our family behave? What is good for our family? Maybe other families do it differently, but this is how we do it. So we want to establish a good sense of right and wrong. And this is something I've said before, and I may say it every episode. You start teaching this when your child is very young. 3 years old is not too late. And you don't want to wait until they're teenagers and then give them a long list of what you expect from them. By the time they're teenagers, they should know all of this, and they will become your interns and you will be supervisor. But right now, your children are learning new ways in life, and you're the one that will teach them. And you want them to have a good grasp of this before they go to school. So let's look at guilt first. There's two types of guilt. One guilt is healthy guilt. And healthy guilt is guilt that a healthy, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy person feels. We feel guilt when we do something that's wrong and we know it's wrong. And then at the time we do it, we know it's wrong. And then we consciously decide to do it anyway. When we go through that process, if it really is wrong and we have any kind of a conscience, our soul will tell us that we did something bad and we will feel bad. Your feelings come from what you're thinking. They don't come from other people. So a healthy person doesn't feel guilt because of what another person says. They feel guilt because in their heart and in their soul, they know they did something wrong. And so there's 3 rules to know, and then I'm going to give you an example about myself. The first rule is it really has to be wrong. And the way we determine that is we see in our society, whatever your society is, and remember your society is much bigger than your best friends. It's much bigger than your church. It's much bigger than your country. There are certain things that universally people have decided are wrong. So some of those things are hurting other people. We can hurt them physically. We can hurt them emotionally. We can hurt them financially. There's many ways that we can hurt other people. And how much we hurt them is on a continuum. I mean, we can give them a dirty look, or we can hack into their bank account. So there's terrible things we can do, and we just have to turn on the news to hear all the things that we do. Now, our children, we're not going to go through all of that with them, of course. But in our heart, as an adult, before we're teaching children, we have to have an established idea of what is right and wrong. So, in order to make something really wrong and for us to feel guilty of it, number one, it has to be wrong. It has to be a wrong thing to do. Second of all, we have to know at the time that it was the wrong thing to do. And the third thing is we have to know that knowing it's wrong, we do it anyway. We make a conscious decision to do it. So if you're a normally healthy person, you will feel guilt. Last week I talked about narcissists. And if you grow up to be a narcissist, or worse than that, a sociopath, you're not going to feel guilt. You're not going to feel remorse. So we want to instill the seeds of understanding guilt when children are right around 3 years old, when they start making decisions about their behavior. That's healthy guilt. Now, another person cannot make you feel guilt. Guilt comes from within you. It doesn't come from another person. So when somebody says to you, "Are you trying to make me feel guilty?" A good response to that is, "No, I'm not making you feel guilty. I'm asking you to take responsibility." So a healthy person will do that. There's also toxic guilt. And that's when you've done something and it goes against somebody else's moral code that you may not share. And they want you to feel guilty. You don't have to feel guilty if you know you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes if you do something and another person doesn't like it, they want you to feel bad for doing it. And that's toxic guilt. You don't have to take on that guilt. You just have to think real quick in your mind, was that really wrong? No, I told the truth. Does it hurt somebody? Well, that person's upset. But they're upset because they think I made them upset. You can't make another person feel things. Our feelings come from our thoughts and our own experience. They don't come from other people. So nobody can make you feel guilty, and you can't make another person feel guilty. If a person thinks you've done something wrong, you can talk it out. And if they explain to you why they think it's wrong, you may agree. But if you did something they don't like, but it's not wrong, sometimes when you tell the truth, people get angry. You don't have to feel guilty about that. Sometimes when you stand up for yourself, people get angry and they want you to feel guilty. You don't have to. So let me give you an example for myself, of guilt. I was raised in a family where punishment was very common. Every day somebody was in trouble. Spanking and hitting was very common. Name calling was common. And so when I had children, because I was the oldest daughter of 12 children, I had a lot of experience with little kids and babies and the little ones. And I loved it. That was a wonderful part of my life. So when I had babies, I thought, I know exactly what to do. I started off on the foot that I thought was the best. They were always clean. They were always fed. I played with them. I loved them. But as they got a little older, I wanted them to be really good people. And I was told, like many people of my generation, that spanking was a big part. And not just spanking, but if you were really angry with what they did, you could hit them. You could scream at them. You could be ugly, but that was good because they would grow up to be good people. Well, when I had some time, I was able to go back to school to get my education degree. I wanted to be a teacher at that time. The first class I took was early childhood development. I walked out of that class and cried all the way to my car because I realized that what I had been doing with my children was cruel. It was mean. I got angry with them, and I thought it was okay. So I just sat in my car and cried and thought, I'm a horrible mother. How could I have done that? And I thought about how I hated growing up in that family where somebody was always getting spanked or hurt or yelled at. And I just thought, I'm a terrible mother. And it took me months, maybe even a year or more, to realize that I wasn't really a terrible mother. I was an ignorant mother who had developed really bad habits. And so I forgave myself and told myself that I would never be like that again. As my children got older, I talked to my oldest son because, of course, he's the one that took the brunt of my bad behavior as a parent. And I told him how sorry I was for how I had treated him when he was 3 and 4 years old. And I was so happy with his response, which I don't think I deserved. He said, Mom, when I think about you when I was young like that, the only real memory I have is being really sick and throwing up in the toilet and you rubbing my back and saying, it's going to be okay. And I thought, oh my God, what a reprieve. It washed away my guilt because I thought it didn't ruin him forever. And he's a wonderful man today. But it gives me chills to think if I had continued that behavior and I didn't get good information and I didn't learn a better way, where might he be today? So that to me that's a good example of toxic guilt and healthy guilt. I didn't let myself feel guilty because I realized I did not know at the time, and I was doing what I was taught and what everybody around me was doing. If I had known, and when I learned, it stopped. I think that's a sense of feeling a guilt, but not carrying guilt with me the rest of my life. But also, I think had I just felt guilty forever and not sat and thought about it and sorted that all out, I might still be feeling guilty today. So a healthy guilt is when you examine your conscience and you say, I didn't realize that that was wrong, but I did it. And as soon as I got better information, it stopped. So with healthy guilt, when we realize what we're doing is wrong and we try to change our behavior, we say, this is wrong. We admit it to ourselves and I'm never doing it again. That's the end of it. So let's look at shame. Shame is a very important feeling and we should all feel it. And so one of the things that happens is when we do something and we're guilty of it, and we really are trying to be a good person, we're going to feel shame. We're going to say, that was a terrible thing to do, and I really am ashamed of myself. I need to make it right. I need to go back to that person and say, I did this. And I don't want to, I just want it to go away. I'm so sorry I did it. And I guess that's part of my example that I gave too. It was like going to my son as an adult and saying, this is what I did, and I am so sorry for it. And I really felt shame. And so when shame is toxic, is when we shame somebody, we call them names and we're ugly because they're too tall, or they're too short, or they're too skinny, or they're too fat, or they're too black, or they're too white, or they're ignorant, or they're uneducated, or they're mentally ill. And we shame them by calling them names, by ignoring them, by pushing them away from us. And that kind of shame probably comes from the earliest part of our brain, the reptilian brain, where deep down we are afraid of anything that's different than us because we think it's going to hurt us. So what we do in many ways is we dehumanize that person. We make them feel ashamed of how tall they are or how short they are, or the fact that they have a physical disfigurement, which means they just look different than other people. We do that individually and personally, but we also do it as a group, as a race, as a nationality. I think it's like almost an animalistic. It's our most base behavior. It doesn't involve our brain at all, especially if we refuse to learn, if we don't want to know about that person and or that group of people, and we somehow shame them. We see that going on in our country so much today. And you know what's really interesting is that little children don't really have that kind of shaming of other people. There's so many stories that we see on social media that are just really adorable, but like little kids, that one little boy told his mother that he had a twin at school. And then when she met him, she found that one was black and one was white. And she thought it was interesting that her little boy still saw them as twins. So there's so many things that we need to examine our own conscience and asking ourselves as parents, how am I? Is my behavior okay? Do I sit around with my friends in front of my children and laugh about mean things I've done, mean things I've said, and think they're funny? Because remember, your children are going to learn from how you act. And I've talked about this when we talk about our vision statement. We have to be the person we want our children to be. We have to be their model. And like it or not, we're their best model. We teach them things we want them to know, but unfortunately, we also teach them things that we don't want them to know. But one thing we can teach them, and these are the good conversations for timeout, just to sit with them and say, what do you think you did wrong? Why do you think that was wrong? Do you feel bad about that? Yeah, I bet you feel ashamed of yourself. How can we make that better? And when you're having these talks, there's no anger. You're their best teacher and their best friend. You put your arm around them and you love them. I want to give you one example, and I hope I don't have to edit this out because this is a real life situation. I have the most adorable great grandson, and he's 4 years old. And my husband is older and starting to feel a little frail. And my grandson has this wonderful habit of running into our arms and to get a hug. And we tell him, you have to be careful because we're old. You can knock us over. So the last time he was visiting, he spent the night. And of course, he did the 4-year-old ritual that every kid does, is jump on the bed, turn somersaults on the bed, throw pillows. I mean, just that's how you go to bed when you're 3 or 4. He decided to jump off the bed into Papa's arms. And of course, Papa couldn't take that weight and fell back against the wall. Didn't get hurt. I was there. My daughter was there. We both grabbed him, and he was fine. But probably 5 minutes later, when we left the room, my grandson came out and he said, "Mimi, is Papa okay?" And I said, "Yes, he is okay. He's okay." And then later on, he went to his Papa and he said, "Papa, did I hurt you? Are you okay?" I had in my mind that I was going to do this episode. And so I thought, what a wonderful thing. We're doing some things right with him. I mean, Papa and I are just loving him, but his parents really are doing a wonderful job. That was so important because if we said yes, he had gotten hurt, he would feel so bad. He would also wonder how he could fix it. So that's where we want to be with our young children. We want to teach them what's right and wrong, and almost anything, well, no, not almost, anything a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-old does can be fixed. So we want to teach them how do you take responsibility? How do you say, "I did it, and I'm sorry, and I'll be careful next time"? You sometimes have to put the words in their mouth. They've not been down this road before, and we're hoping you have. So those are my thoughts to share on guilt and shame. I hope they're helpful to you, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Be kind to one another.